It's beyond obscene. As a matter of fact, it's almost funny that the iconic picture of the Red Army soldier lifting the Soviet flag to a flagpole above the rubble of the Reichstag 75 years ago, yesterday, has been banned from Facebook. The most iconic, one of the most at least, iconic photographs in all history has been banished. I think the rest of us should do what we can to spread it around the world, myself. Turns out that it was the Americans and the British that won the Second World War, even though 4 out of every 5 Nazi casualties in the war were at the hands of the Red Army, at the hands of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union lost 27 million citizens, a figure which dwarfs every other country on the earth except for China, which doesn't even get a look in on these occasions. The Soviet Union lost 27 million. China may well have lost 20 million people in the Second World War. But according to a tweet from the White House, not even Donald Trump's increasingly unhinged personal Twitter account, from the White House Twitter account, it said that the United States and Great Britain had won the Second World War. Well, talk about rewriting history. I know why they do it. They do it for 2 reasons. First, they have to demonize the former Soviet Union. Because what would people conclude if they really knew that the Soviet Union had been so strong that it tore the guts out of the Wehrmacht, to quote the British Prime Minister Winston Churchill? What would it say about the Soviet Union that it was able to absorb the onslaught of millions of Nazi soldiers, whilst the European governments folded like cheap tents in front of the assault of that very same army? Von Paulus, the German general who surrendered at Stalingrad, had earlier led the German armed forces into Paris. He captured France with his soldiers. What would it say about the Soviet Union if people really knew that the Soviet Union had been so great that it had destroyed Nazism, the existential threat to humanity, to civilization on this planet? And the second reason is because since the coming to power of Putin, Russia has gotten off the floor where it was lying drunk, having its pockets picked, and has begun to restore its strength, its national dignity, its unity, its cohesion, its importance in the world. Russia is one of only a few countries in the world still pursuing independent development and rejecting the incredible efforts of the United States and its allies to dictate what happens in every corner of the world. So for these 2 reasons, Russia and the Soviet Union have to be written out of the script. And these are the people who tell you about fake news. These are the people searching everywhere for bots and Twitter accounts that might just take a different point of view to the prevailing orthodoxy. When you rewrite the history of the victory of the Allies in the Second World War, if you're capable of rewriting that, you literally are capable of any lie, no matter how large. Now, Boris Johnson speaking now, he says that they have implemented measures and stopped a catastrophe. Well, I'm not sure if they stopped it. As I said, we are the worst in the world for deaths per million citizens. We have the 2nd highest death toll in the world, and we are catching up, actually, on the United States of America even though we have 68 million people in our country and they have at least 4 times that, maybe 5 times that. Boris Johnson says it would be madness to allow a second spike. We must stay alert. So don't forget that. Stay alert. Look out for the coronavirus. He says that there is the shape of a plan, the first sketch of a roadmap to reopen society. He said he's consulted all 4 nations across the UK. He said, I believe that as the Prime Minister, there is a strong resolve to beat it. That's just meaningless verbiage. Although we have a plan, it's a conditional plan. We have to satisfy the 5 tests. To chart our progress, we're establishing a new COVID alert system. And here I have it now in hard copy. He says there will be 5 alert levels, from 1 to 5, 5 being the most critical. We're now at level 4. Why then did you change your slogan? Why did you change the color of your slogan? From red, stop, to green, go. Why did you abandon the slogan, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives? Why did you abandon that slogan in favor of the meaningless, utterly risible command that we should stay alert? 2, most things you must do is reverse the number of deaths in care homes. And a world-beating system. We're going to have a world-beating system of test and trace. We are testing literally hundreds of thousands of people each day, he said. But that's not true. You never once tested 100,000, not literally hundreds of thousands of people each day. That is a brazen lie, Prime Minister. In time, you'll be able to detect local flares in your area. This is not the time to modify the lockdown. Why then did you brief the press during the week and produce all these headlines about Happy Monday, about the lockdown being over? And above all, why is your Chancellor set to outline brutal cuts to the furlough system, which will, of course, force people back to work in unsafe working conditions? Because, of course, there is no lockdown if people are faced with the choice of going hungry or going back to work in an unsafe environment. It's been said that the Chancellor is going to cut the furlough from 80% of your wages to 60%. But there's some reports today that he's planning to scrap the furlough altogether. Now, I hate to tell you this, Prime Minister. You weren't in Parliament at the time, but I was. Article 44 of the Employment Rights Act makes it a legal duty of workers and managers to walk off any job which is unsafe. I was one of those responsible for legislating the Corporate Manslaughter Act, which makes it a criminal offence for which the employer can go to prison for requiring workers to work in an unsafe environment. Now, if we have any trade unions left, if those trade unions have any idea of what their purpose in life is, those unions will be telling the Prime Minister right now, our members will not be going back to work until you have cleaned the workplace, until you have made it clear and measurable that the danger to our members, your workers, has been eliminated. Now, here's more. There will now be unlimited outdoor exercise, but you must obey the rules of social distancing. That one I support. There is evidence that the sunlight and the warmth of the current weather can be helpful, not only in potentially destroying the virus, but in improving the mental health, sense of well-being of the population. I just make this plea. Can you not jog past people panting out your coronavirus breath in other people's faces? If you're going to jog rather than walk, can you put a mask on? Can you turn your face away as you run past other people? And by the way, is the Thames walkway a walkway or a cycle track? Mayor Sadiq Khan, I'm only asking. Fines will be increased on those who break the rules. After June the 1st, some shops and primary schools will open. Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, is at the front of demanding a return to work, an exit strategy, he calls it, and he's demanding that the schools be reopened, even though that would send the virus running amok in the schools, amongst the children, and amongst their families when they come home from work. By July, says the Prime Minister, we will hope to open at least some of the hospitality industry and other places. Yeah, it's a pity you hadn't stopped the horse racing. It's a pity you hadn't told the Cheltenham Festival that it couldn't go ahead. It's a pity that you hadn't told Liverpool Football Club and the European football authorities that they couldn't play the game between Liverpool and Atletico Madrid, the clue being in the name Madrid, which was even then under lockdown. It's all conditional, apparently, according to Boris Johnson, but it will soon be the time to impose quarantine by air passengers from abroad. What do you mean it will soon be the time? You have been allowing flights from New York City, from Wuhan, from Iran to land here, and thousands of passengers from these hot spots of the coronavirus to walk through our airports and into our communities. Why did you do that? I feel about this a bit like I feel about the so-called war on drugs. There's never been a war on drugs, as anyone passing through an airport knows, as anyone watching cargo arriving at ports knows. There's never been a war on drugs, and therefore it's wrong to say that the war on drugs is lost. It never started. Neither has there truly been a lockdown in Britain, because you can't have a lockdown when you are allowing unlimited numbers of passengers from the worst affected areas in the world to freely fly into our country. We had, as we did in the Second World War, quite a considerable advantage in being an island. When you're an island, you can take a decision that people are not coming in. And that's what we should have done. And we never did it. And now we're told it will soon be the time to impose quarantine by air passengers from abroad. I quite simply don't understand that. So anyway, what's your view? Give me your calls. Here's the numbers. The UK number, 02077 982 255. If you're in the US, 001 757 744 4480. And of course, you can tweet me at George Galloway. You can tweet us at RTUK, preferably add both, so the RT know that there's a lot of throughput on this show. It's very important that they should know just how many people are watching and listening and responding to this show. And maybe then they'll even give us a second show so that we can be with you twice a week, maybe once in the midweek, to update you on the stories we dealt with the previous weekend. Work from home if you can, says Boris, but you should go to work if you can't work from home. Well, that's the most significant of these statements, isn't it? Work from home if you can, which is fine for people in a profession like mine. I already worked from home most of the time. But for the mass of the working class in this country, working from home is utterly meaningless. You can't do your factory work from home. You can't do your warehouse work from home. You can't work in a shop from home. You can't work in your office in most of the jobs from home. And so that statement from Boris Johnson, wrapped around with all these caveats, is the bull point. Work from home if you can, but you should go to work if you can't work from home. So there you go. That is the order of the British Prime Minister. The R rate is still amongst the worst in the world. The deaths are continuing at roughly 600 per day on average. We're top of the World Death League. But if you can't work from home, you should go to work. Where, unless you stay alert now, why don't you? Pay attention. Unless you stay alert, unless you control this virus, you'll be right in the thick of a second wave. Just like the people were between 1918 and 1922, when the Spanish flu rampaged throughout the world, killing perhaps 50 million people across the planet. And guess what? Guess what? The second wave of Spanish flu was much, much, much worse than the first. So it's a death sentence that Boris Johnson has just pronounced on thousands of workers and all those who agitated for this, whether they think themselves on the left or believe themselves to be on the right, whether they're libertarians or whether they are utter reactionaries, all of you who have agitated for this will have the blood of thousands of people on your hands. I'll be right back.